Hello and welcome to this week's conversation in our Women of Significance in STEM Leadership series of conversations. My name is Leah Zalams and I am the executive coach for leader development for STEM executives. And I am doing this research to uncover some of the career stories and highlights and the mindset behind the success of a number of women in the science and technology industry who are creating success for themselves in spite of all the barriers of bias, of biases and challenges and barriers that are causing the imbalance of representation of women in leadership. So we're looking at ways of how do we inspire more girls to choose education and careers in science and technology. And then when they get there, how do we keep them there so that they then can become the leaders to take those seats at the table that we so badly need to make sure that our future innovation and development is represented more equally between the genders, and then all the other issues around the gender pay gap that still exist because we are working in a domain, in an environment that was developed and is still very much dominated by male cultures. So today we have the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Onisha Patel. And Onisha is a structural biologist at the Walter and Eliza Institute of Medical Research in Melbourne. And she uses cutting-edge technologies to capture the beauty of molecules that make up life at the nanoscale. And today we're going to explore what has inspired Onisha to pursue this path and what are some of the success secrets that she has to be carving her career in this environment today. So welcome, Onisha.
Thank you, Leah. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you. So tell me, perhaps you can start to tell us a little bit about what you do and what problem it actually solves. I mean, like you, I'm deeply curious about life at the molecular level for the sake of knowing about how it works. But if we're going to attach that with what kind of problem we solve and what that's going to give us, perhaps you can share a little bit about that to start with.
Yes, so in your introduction, you mentioned that I'm a structural biologist. And a structural biologist is a scientist who looks at shapes and structures of biological molecules. And specifically, I'm looking at protein molecules. And most of us have heard about proteins in the context of food and that they are good for us. But in a biological context, we are made up of proteins, you know, our hair, bones, muscles, and then internally our immune system is made up of proteins. So we're fighting against infections. And my job is to study the shape of these protein molecules. And why is it important? So I like to use an analogy of that, say, if you want to design a key to a lock, you need to know what the lock should look like. You need to know the shape of the lock so that you can design the key, which is specifically for this lock. So similarly, if you want to design new medicines, you need to know what your target looks like. So these targets are your protein molecules, which often in a disease context can become faulty. So if you want to design medicines against these proteins, then you need to know what the shape and the structure of these proteins looks like. And that's basically my job. So I use special techniques that gives me insight, deeper insight at a nanoscale level to look what these molecules look like.
And so what has inspired you to take this path? Because there are so many different choices we can make. And I love that analogy about the lock and the key, and the fact that we have technology that allows us to see it And so when we can see it, we can then, as you say, design things that will actually have impact. So I'm curious how who was it that influenced you, or how did you come to make that decision to pursue this line of science?
So this line of science actually I came to know about it, during my master's, for which I came to Australia. So say going back to when so I grew up in India, so that's where I did my school. And in India, when you are in year 10, you have to make a choice between whether you do science or whether you do commerce. And commerce included arts as well. And so that's sort of a defining stage for a lot of kids growing up. And for me, because I grew up with an interest in art as well, and I think art was a way, I would say, I got interested into science, is because when I was playing around with art, I was very crafty as well. So I would make things, break things, experiment with things, observe, go out in the garden and look at things, look at plants, insects. And it sort of built that keen observation skills for me. And then that developed into that curiosity of then finding why. So I would say, yeah, even when I'm going to school, I often start with that art is what got me into science. So in year 10, I decided I'll take up science because I was good at it as well. But I did miss the point that why I couldn't do arts as well. And at the time that option wasn't available. So that was a disappointing thing. And then later on, I continued with that, did my undergraduate in India. And later on in the school years, I heard the story about Kiran Majumdar Shaw, who's the CEO of the largest biotech company in India. And her story was that she moved to Australia in the late 70s to study brewing. And I heard that story and I thought that's such an unconventional career. And her story kind of gave me that spark that it is possible. So I came to Australia on a scholarship and I did my master's. And then towards the end of master's, I sort of learned about structural biology. And because structural biology is all about seeing, you're looking at that inner space, you're looking at molecules which are so tiny. And it just clicked in the sense that, this is the way to go for me. And it just fulfills that, intersection of art and science for me. So now I guess I use art mainly to create artistic images based on my work and then exhibit that at art exhibitions. And, it gives me an opportunity to talk to a wider audience and communicate about medical research through art.
That's fantastic, Onisha, because this is a whole, additional initiative, isn't it? Putting the A into STEM to make STEAM. And I think this is very exciting what you're doing, because so much of, in order to be seen, we need to be understood as well. And if we can be understood through pictures, you're appealing, as you say, to a wider audience, and also another way of expressing the value and the depth and the breadth of what science and technology can do. That exactly, it's not all about beavering away all alone with your test tubes in the laboratory, which is certainly, where I started all way back when. There are so many different pathways. And what I'm also hearing is that you were very intentional and introspective about what was important to you from a young age. And you also mentioned a role model who wasn't necessarily a close connection to you, but somebody who came across your path and again showed you there was a different way. And
Yep.
so, and this is also, you know, a big part of the initiatives around bringing more role models into schools, especially for girls to be made aware of different role models and options earlier. And now you're bringing another flavor with art. That's wonderful.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And my role with as a Superstars of STEM allows me to you know, go to schools, and when I am there, you know, I definitely bring up art in it, because I have met students who tell me that they like art and science, but they're not aware of, well, what future career they can have. And in my case, I missed out that, you know, option early on, that why don't we integrate arts and humanities and social sciences early on? Because even as scientists and technologists and engineers, we need knowledge of humanities and social sciences. It's quite important.
It absolutely is. And perhaps could you share a little bit about the Superstars of STEM program? Because I understand that's a highly competitive program to be selected into. So firstly, congratulations. And it's quite, it's a reasonably new initiative. So if you could share a little bit about that for us.
Yeah. So we are 60 Superstars of STEM. So we got selected in 2019, and we are the second cohort of Superstars of STEM. The first cohort was before us, so there were 30 Superstars of STEM. And the program is all about encouraging the next generation of young kids to in STEM, and for me, I would say STEAM. And you know, the idea is that if you you know, like for me, hearing the story of Kiran Majumdar-Shaw was important, and it was that, you know, I've never met her, but reading that story was quite empowering, that, oh, if she can do it, maybe I can also go to Australia. And, you know, of course, I had the support of my parents, because education was always a big deal in the society that I grew up. But if you can't see it, then, or if you can't hear it, then you wouldn't know that it's possible. And I guess that's what my role as a Superstars of STEM provides me, is that, you know, we get a lot of training to go out and talk to media, talk to schools, talk to journalists, and it sort of has empowered me quite a lot. You know, it's completely different from my day-to-day work that I do in the lab and, you know, away from everyone. And now I'm out and about talking about my work. And then at the same time, I'm also talking about that, you know, if you're interested in art, there are, you know, ways you can integrate this. And the future is all about cross-disciplinary, interdisciplinary collaborations.
So the Superstars of STEM program, so giving you an opportunity to learn or extend the communication skills
That's right,
that
yeah.
you already have. So tell me what empowerment means to you when you say that learning how to speak to journalists or speak, you know, at schools to students has empowered me. Learning those skills, what was it that's given you? Because that word is bandied around a lot, and I wonder whether we all want it, but what does it actually mean to you, Onisha?
So if I were to, I wouldn't know how to define it exactly, but if I look back when I grew up, say, I had access to education, but many girls in India don't have access to education. But even access to education alone wasn't enough at the time for me to know that what is possible, what can I do with my life. And that's because I didn't really have role models in my immediate family to look up to, see that, you know, I want to do that, or this is possible, or why can't you know, why can't we like, so for me, so for example, so when my earliest, like I didn't know the meaning of the word feminism till too late in my life. But as a kid, I know I will always fight with my brother on having equal shares of chocolate. And at the time I had no idea. And I also will tell my mom is that why I had to do house chores and my brother didn't have to do house chores. And as a kid, now I look back, I'm like, those are important questions. And I was asking at the time.
You
and
hadn't labeled them. You couldn't label it as feminism. And as you're saying, I'm nodding and I'm thinking that's a human right. This is a human rights issue.
But at the time,
because it's coming from within you, without the label, without someone telling you it should be 50-50 for chores, it should be 50-50 for chocolate. Why does a boy get, But we couldn't label it. So go on.
Yeah, so exactly. So for me, that was a spark of that. Okay, you provide education, but then you also need to build up that empowerment on saying that, whatever you do in your life later on, you shouldn't be not have those equal opportunities. So for me, so I know that, from speaking to women who come from culturally reserved background, it's not that they're not educated. Sometimes they lack that, whether you call it empowerment or encouragement or that little hidden, confidence that, put yourself out there, you can do it. Why would you say no? And I guess, culturally in from our society, we take all these feelings with us, and empowerment is about, leaving them behind and show your potential.
Oh, let me write that down. Empowerment means leaving them behind, because they're the old beliefs, aren't they? They're the beliefs of the mothers, the grandmothers that came before us. Yes. So leave them behind. And what did you say?
Show your potential.
Show your potential. See, and I'm going to jump here to something else that you mentioned around the fact that there is a lot of talk about getting more girls into STEM and into STEM leadership. We have panels, we have reports. In fact, there's another new one coming out that's come out this week. And there are a lot of government initiatives, particularly here in Australia, and that is exciting. It's a great start, because when we talk about it, it means there's potential for things to happen. So, and there are some great initiatives by different scientists, entrepreneurs, and so forth. But I'm curious to hear from where you sit, Onisha. What other kinds of actions, now that you are finding you're actually, it sounds like you're enjoying a little bit of the sharing your story and shining the light on science and how to integrate science and art together. So in doing that, it sounds like you're creating your identity at the same time as inspiring the younger generation coming through, and also defining more so, what's important to you. So I'm thinking, what other kinds of actions could we be doing? If you could wave a magic wand, what else comes to mind for you?
So say, for example, at schools, I know that, so I grew up in school, there were a lot of female teachers, but there wasn't, talk about that, you're good at this, you can do that, or you can be an engineer, you like physics, you can go and do that, you like maths, go and do that. And that, I think that like teachers are, teachers and parents, I guess, they are the early identifiers of your potential, right? You were, surrounded by them. And we need to, have that ability to tell early on that, you could do that, it's possible. And I do that, I guess, to my nephew. So he likes designing shoes, which is very unconventional. He's only 13, but at the same time, he likes maths. And I always tell them that, well, find a way that you can combine both. Don't give up one for the other, because you never know what is possible by mixing multiple passions. And that's, I don't think so we talk about that enough. Like, there's always about siloed way of saying that, you know do this or do not. And I guess as kids, you have that freedom. Like, your mind is so curious, you will come up with ideas, and that's the best time to not push them and say, oh, that's not possible, or you can choose, you will have to choose between the two. So I guess that's the point I would probably want to encourage teachers and parents
Yes.
to
So
do
I'm
that very
thinking
early on.
to encourage more possibility thinking, more what if it was possible, more of the looking at through a more positive lens, through encouraging more creative thinking earlier on, rather than putting the reality on, which the reality is always the lens through which we are looking.
Exactly.
And a lot of teachers, that's the other struggle, isn't it? Where our teaching system there is so under pressure with just getting through the curriculum. Where is the space and the time, to be then, really facilitating the mindset development of our young people. And
Exactly.
as you say, we've got to nurture this when they're young. Otherwise, by the time already, even like you say, in 15, 16 is still very young to be asked to make a choice between science or commerce. And I think in the UK, it's been similar. At quite a young age, you're choosing science or arts. And so, but decisions are being made already, aren't they? And a lot of that around what we, even as young people, are seeing our own potential. And there's that, and this is where we're seeing the value again of role models and early intervention of possibility thinking, of mindset development, because the universe does have a way of throwing up challenges. As soon as you put up a big goal or to speak up, you're always going to have people that don't agree with you, or there's the fear of criticism, the imposter syndrome of I'm not good enough, or all of that tends to cause people, kids, to perhaps not take risks and not see that potential. But as you say, if they don't have someone even instilling that idea in the first place, that education is definitely important, and parental support and having the means to be able to support a good education is step one. But in addition to that, we need the voices and the examples of women who are doing it, who are
Exactly.
who are following their passion. So this is the other element of connecting, like finding what it is that you love and connecting that with a career path, with a path of study that then takes you into careers that feeds that part of you. And then and it sounds like you've done this, Onisha, or you're well on the way already. So I'm keen to hear from you some of the what are one or two of the big challenges that have you ever felt like it was too hard and you wanted to give up? Maybe that's a good question for you.
Yes. There were times during my PhD I wanted to feel like giving up, and that was as simple as something not working. And which is so normal when you're doing research. And obviously it was my first experiences where it was repeated failure. And now I wouldn't use the word failure, I probably would use setbacks. And you figure out like that, just you know how to figure it out. And research is made up of that, and in a way that's what is enjoyable about research, because you don't know where you're going, and every step you take leads you somewhere closer to where you want to go, or lead to completely unexpected outcomes. So that's what it is. And I guess you were right talking about change of mindset, because I can understand the pressure that the school system is, and also in academia, like in university, our curriculum hasn't changed at all. And even things like, so as a researcher, our grant funding system has not changed for a long time. So, yes, we have this ways of doing things that has not changed for many years, and that definitely needs a bit of a new face. And often I feel that that itself, it would involve a lot of different kind of people and a lot of different kind of experiences. And for me, I talk about art and science quite a lot because that's my own experience. And even in universities, I was spoken to professors and lecturers, and I've told them that why can't the science department have some, like, an art class, or a humanities class, or social sciences, and talking about discoveries or ethics is important. Just because you can do it doesn't mean you should do it. What are the ethical basis of what you're doing? And those questions are important to talk about even at undergraduate level, because it's too late when things already happen and then there's no ethics in place. And we already seeing this happening a lot, at least in technology. Yeah.
Yes. So again, looking at diversity, the importance of having people with diverse ways of thinking, and again, not just male, female, or cultural by country, but of, like, with you're going to speak up about the importance of art and in a science environment, because this is where you're bringing your uniqueness and your point of view to the table, that someone who has never experienced the value of an art related experience for themselves has had before. And so, but it takes courage to speak up about what's important to you, Onisha. And I think that's also plays into the empowerment, isn't it? That when you have the skills and the training to speak about things, that helps you then speak about more things that perhaps the norm is not speaking about right now. Or because the fear of criticism, the fear of what other people think, is one of the biggest fears that keeps people stuck, that keeps people from taking risks. And one of the best definitions of science I've heard is that, there, well, not so much a definition, but an attitude towards science is there is no failure in science. All we ever receive is feedback that then informs the next series of decisions. And this is one of the themes that I'm hearing in each of you as I have these conversations, is that you bring a very deliberate approach to problem solving, to how you see things, and you are very multifaceted in your line of inquiry. And so these are the things, as there's starting to be a lot more conversation around the value of STEM trained and STEM educated professionals in leadership teams, in boardrooms, in government, because of this ability of how you approach problem solving. Like you say, you take into account the ethics. We take into the account, yes, what's the so what of this? What is, and the different angles that you can take into account, and the fact that we must be able to see what's happening. And the more we can see, then the better decisions we're going to make.
Yep. I totally agree with you. I sort of resonated with when you just said before that the fear of failure, or not speaking up because of the fear of failure. And one of the reasons I like art, so say art is very subjective. There is no right or wrong answer, to look at the painting and say this is good or this is bad. So people have objective and subjective opinions. And I know like there's a program run in medicine, not as much in Australia, but overseas. It's called Art in Medicine, which basically are training a lot of physicians to look at art. So I think what the idea behind is that you can have your objective opinion, you can have your subjective opinion. And when you realize your subjective opinion is differing from someone else, because you're both commenting on something you've never seen before, and that idea of that, listen to someone else and come up with the best decision in the end. And in medicine, it always happens when you're making diagnosis, right? Like someone has one opinion and then you go and get a second opinion or a third opinion. And in the same way, you know, right now in COVID, wear a mask, don't wear a mask, you know, that was a thing that held on for months. And the idea is that, you know, people will have these opinions, people will, you know, have differences on what they perceive. But the best way to come up to any conclusion or any decision making is listen to diverse opinion, sit together, and then come up with what the best strategy is. And sometimes I think art is a good way because it literally brings out those differences of opinion. Yeah.
Yes, and it's something that is you know, foreign to both parties as well. So neither of them will have, like we took two doctors looking at a piece of art, then neither of them are experts in art, for instance, whereas, you know, they will be experts in epidemiology or, you know, their field of, you know, of speciality. And you're right. And I think medicine is very stooped in how they've always done things as well. And so how do we change that, Onisha? If you had a magic wand, right? So what we're seeing is that, you know, we need to inspire the individual through role models at an early age and through, you know, diverse experiences and exposure to different types of learning as well. And so if, you know, I guess if you then looked at the system, how could the system better support you and those coming after you to have a smoother path so that instead of battling the barriers, you can put that energy into the creativity and project design of solving the big problems in the world that we need solving? You know, it's like, you know, if we didn't have to fight for that seat at the table, we, you know, imagine the creativity and the quicker time to solution, isn't it? Because this is what we're dealing with, the time that we have to spend in overcoming the barriers. It is tiring to have when you're speaking and not being heard. And I think that causes people to give up too.
Yeah, it's true. Like, so, you know, we talk about equity. You know, there's one way of that, okay, provide extra support for someone who's different, or remove the barrier so that it's equally for everyone. And now I kind of feel that we're doing more of the former of providing extra support, but not enough of completely getting rid of the barrier so that it never comes in the way of those following behind you. Because, you know, people are different, you know, and for a long time we keep talking about diversity just based on gender, but then, you know, diversity from a intersectional point of view is even more complex. You know, you have to take many things in regards to, you know, someone, not just their gender. And I guess for me, I would probably, you know, we need to listen to people who do not conform and look like us. And this is sort of, you know, a big, I guess, deal for me personally. Like, so when I, you know, I'm reading a lot in terms of intersectional leadership and how do you actually try to implement this? And it's hard. Like, I barely knew a lot of things, but, you know, I can clearly remember one you know, episode in my life, if I can share you that, what that means is, so when I first came to Australia, I was an international student. I was looking for a job. I was really desperate because my parents didn't have money to pay for my living expense. So I tried to do do waitressing, which I failed. I think I probably got fired in my third day because I wasn't good at balancing multiple things. I also tried something in call center, which I wasn't good at. And then on a weekend, I would go to the library to read newspaper because I could not even spend $2, which if you convert to Indian currency, it's 40 times more. And I would say, well, I'm not going to be paying that much money for a newspaper. So I would go in the library to look for jobs. And one of my lecturers noticed I was there on the weekend, and he asked me, what are you doing? And I said, I'm looking for jobs. And a week after, he offered me a job to help him in the lab as a lab technician. He did not interview me. I did very well in his subject. So that was a good point. He did not interview me. He didn't ask me any questions. He didn't care that I just came from India. I don't have any lab experience. He didn't care I have an accent, or I would, he wouldn't understand my accent, or I look different. He just gave me that opportunity, which meant so much for me, because that gave me my first chance to learn technical skills. And then that empowered me to say, I can definitely apply for a PhD scholarship because I have got the skills. So then I applied for a PhD scholarship. And then that just got me on my track to being a scientist. So, that opportunities really matter. And we really need those opportunities right now. So even in my own field as a scientist, like when I go to conferences, we invite, like the conferences that I've been in Australia, we invite our keynote speaker from overseas. And mostly those keynote speakers are from US or Europe. And there are many, keynote speakers from other countries who could have that spot, and they are doing amazing research. And, recently with the Black Lives Matter, we talked a lot about that. And even there was a lot of talking in academic environment. And, to be honest, I have not seen a single Black academic invited as a keynote speaker in Australia, at least in my field. And I reflected back on this, on my years of experiences, all the conferences I've been to, and I'm like, why not? Why not? They need opportunity as well. And these opportunities do count in terms of your promotion, because, speaking opportunities, organizing events, or being on board. And these opportunities usually are behind the doors, tap on a shoulder. We do have a lookalike culture. And, when I see my example with my, the lecturer who gave me that one opportunity, he absolutely did not look at any of those. He just gave me a chance. And I think that's important. And that's probably more of those kind of example I would like to see.
And that's a really important example, again, of what could have been seen as a chance meeting. And yet I'm sure what he saw was someone who had a work ethic and a dedication and a commitment to their craft, to their study, to their future. And how pivotal was that? And as you say, today it gives you an experience of exactly that, how someone who didn't look like you, who there was no common ground, or no hoops that you needed to jump through in order to meet his requirements. He gave you a chance. And exactly, I think this is exactly what I think is the impetus behind the Superstars of STEM program and the various initiatives to showcase what women are doing, how they're navigating the challenges to even discover what their passion is. And as you say, what I also hear is that opportunity of that job, not only did it give you the immediate need you had, which was to make some money so you could eat, but it gave you the skills that built the mindset that helped you to say, yes, I could do a PhD. because I've got these skills. So this is the again, the integration, right, of the education, the people, the role models, and the opportunity to do stuff, and to build those skills, because science is very much a doing industry, but it's how we approach it that is going to make the difference of how quickly we can break those barriers. Because like you say, the biases and that old way of thinking, they are hard to change, and you're looking at systemic change. But you know what gives me a lot of that sense of optimism is actually one of the things we see with the COVID situation is how quickly our behavior can change when it's life and death. We can all, you know, adapt very quickly when we have to, and collectively. And we've seen the impact of that. And so, you know, I have faith in human nature, Onisha, and I know that our future is bright, and it's getting even brighter with people like yourself who are taking that leadership mantle so much earlier in your career as well, that you're doing, you know, all the wonderful work that you're doing, and you have a patent, and you've been very successful in grant applications, which again is how you feed yourself now. And all that, plus you're here to inspire and be that leading light for the generations to come. And there's lots of wonderful lessons and success secrets that you've shared with us today. And I'm really looking forward to, perhaps you could share when your next art exhibition is, or if, you know, if women are watching and they'd like to get in touch with you, where's the best place for them to connect with you?
So I am all on Twitter at Dr._O Patel, and I'm on the Instagram. So that's where I promote the art. And it's also at Dr._O Patel. And I'm also on LinkedIn. So I keep the LinkedIn and the Twitter more to talk about science and STEM. And then I keep the Instagram to promote my art. And there's an exhibition in September. I assume it will be online, but we are submitting work.
Fantastic. And so will you have that on your LinkedIn profile, or where will we hear about that?
So I normally put that on Instagram.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Wonderful. I really appreciate your time today, Onisha, and look forward to your artwork and the wonderful science in structural biology and protein work that you're doing. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.